CBC, the Windsor Evening News with Carol McNeil.
Good evening, everyone. The Somalia scandal has claimed another high-ranking official. Canada's highest-ranking military officer resigned today. General Jean Boyle has been mired in controversy over the Somalia inquiry. Today, in his written letter of resignation, he said staying on the job would jeopardize both the minister's ability to carry out his duties and my ability to focus on the important issues facing the Canadian forces. Boyle's resignation does not come as a surprise. Just last week, the general's political boss resigned, leaving Boyle with few allies at the top. Stay tuned for a full report on General Jean Boyle's resignation on the CBC Evening News at 6. An OPP officer has been ordered to stand trial in April in the shooting death of Ipperwash native Dudley George. Today, Sergeant Kenneth Dean was told he'll start his trial April 1st on a charge of criminal negligence causing death. But oddly enough, both the defense and the victim's family agree a trial isn't the whole answer. Corey McCrindle explains.
The man at the center of this picture is the man at the center of the controversy. OPP Acting Sergeant Kenneth Dean made a brief appearance in a Sarnia court. He'll be back April 1st before a judge and no jury to face a charge of criminal negligence causing death. His lawyer says he can't understand why his client should stand trial when an inquiry could do more for everyone involved.
If it was done properly, I think it could bring both sides to a table to be able to look at the whole background and come up with solutions, not just charges.
Family members and friends of Dudley George, the man killed at Ipperwash last September, are also calling for an inquiry. They say that would help everyone get to
the truth. We want to know exactly what happened, why our brother was shot. Was it I believe it was unnecessary. His death was unnecessary. I believe that they could have handled it in a different manner. I don't think they had to use force.
Other family members say the experience has made them cynical about the justice system and find it ironic that Dean's case will begin on April Fool's Day.
To me, it is. He's a fool. To think he can get away with this. And you can't murder somebody and expect to get away with it.
Family members say they'll be back here when the trial starts to find out what will happen to the man they say killed Dudley George. Meanwhile, they urge the public to help them push for an inquiry. Corey McCrindle, CBC News, Sarnia.
Phony money is on the rise in Windsor in more ways than one. Police in Windsor are warning the public to be on the lookout for phony $100 bills. Counterfeit 10s and 20s in both Canadian and U.S. currency are passed frequently in the area. But this is the first time bogus $100 Canadian bills have shown up. Pat Jefflin reports.
What happened at this Esso station is typical of how phony bills are passed. A man arrived here late at night on foot. He bought cigarettes and a package of gum and paid for them with a $100 bill.
A young gentleman, young white male, probably in his middle 20s, about 5'8", curly brown hair, kind of thin.
Because the customer had no car, there was no way to trace him once the phony bill was discovered. The casino was also stung recently by someone passing a bogus $100 Canadian bill.
In the province, we know that they've been circulating in Toronto and Woodstock. As a matter of fact, in Woodstock recently, 3 men were arrested in possession of counterfeit $100 bills.
The 2 fake $100 bills discovered in Windsor had the same serial number. This counterfeit money is made by laser and it's very sophisticated. But the gold square on the top left corner is a giveaway. On a real bill, the square turns green if moved toward the light. The phony one does not.
There are some other things. For example, the feel of the paper in the counterfeit bill is generally not the same. It doesn't feel as thick and as heavy a bond.
The detail on a phony bill is also not as sharp as that on a real one.
The Parliament building here on the real bill, you can see the individual windows. On the counterfeit bill, what you're seeing is sort of a blurred image.
Police are warning businesses to be very careful with large denomination bills. Don't accept any money that looks the slightest bit suspicious, and try to get the license plate number of anyone attempting to pass a phony bill. Pat Jefflin, CBC News, Windsor.
It looks like nothing can stop a complete shutdown of General Motors Canada. The two sides remain deadlocked on the issue of outsourcing. Buzz Hargrove says GM seems intent on ending the practice of pattern bargaining. Sources have told the CBC that the walkout at the transmission and trim plant could come as early as 9 o'clock tomorrow night. The city may take legal action against the property owner who allowed large piles of gravel to be dumped on Windsor's waterfront. People living near the piles say they're an eyesore, and they're worried about noise and dirt once trucks start hauling the gravel away. Percy Hatfield reports.
These piles of gravel were offloaded from a ship in the middle of the night last weekend. The gravel is owned by Southwest Sales, a local aggregate supplier. The property on which it sits is owned by a developer in London. The land is zoned to allow the storage of construction materials, but these piles are illegal.
They don't comply with the regulations in that there's a screening fence required around the perimeter of the storage yard, and the material can't project above the height of the screening fence, which is set at 1.8 meters, approximately 6 feet.
Besides the waterfront property, the developer owns the railway cut all the way up to University Avenue and both bridges. The city wanted the land and is negotiating for a land swap with the developer.
I think probably our city father should have been looking at this quite a bit earlier than now.
It isn't right. It doesn't do much for the city of Windsor either.
Ken and Norma Bain live across the street from the gravel piles.
That's parkland forever and a day down along there.
They can't understand how the city ever allowed this to happen.
Well, why isn't there a bylaw about that?
We do have a noise bylaw.
The building commissioner says for now the city will insist that a screening fence be erected. Since much of the gravel is said to be destined for the new casino site, Link says it wouldn't take long to get rid of it all.
It looks large. Actually is a few days worth of aggregate for that particular construction project.
But Southwest Sales has a contract for the site and it can't be cancelled without 6 months' notice. Percy Hatfield, CBC News, Windsor.
A new outdoor skating rink is in the works for Windsor's waterfront.
Today you are embracing a wonderful country.
It will be named after Charlie Clark, the former Chancellor of the University of Windsor and recipient of the Order of Canada. The plan is to convert this parking lot between the provincial building and the courthouse into a public square and skating rink, all in Charles Clark's name.
It will only be a matter of time before Windsorites will be saying, "Meet me at Clark Square," or "Did you hear what's happening at Charlie Clark Square this weekend?" Has a nice ring to it.
Last night, City Council got the ball rolling and approved $50,000 to design the square and ice rink. It's possible a fundraising drive, along with some casino money, will pay for the project without any taxpayer cash. Fire prevention tops your community headlines tonight, fitting since it is still Fire Prevention Week. Local firefighters are hoping a little awareness now will prevent a tragedy later. Here's Malcolm Campbell with your community snapshot.
Tragedies can start just like this. Windsor firefighters hope that the homes of the future will be built with sprinkler systems. They're volunteering their time to get us thinking about fire prevention. They'll be at the Devonshire Mall all week demonstrating their equipment and talking about fire safety. The kids can even ride a fire engine or go up in a rescue bucket every evening.
Well, we're out here to help, hopefully, to educate the citizens of Windsor on how to prevent fires. There's things for the young and old to come out and learn about smoke alarms and escape plans and all sorts of things.
We're just approaching the resource area here.
If you made a donation to buy a Tootsie Roll last June, your money was handed over today. The Knights of Columbus toured the facilities and gave a check for $25,000 to the Windsor Community Living Support Services. The group looks after the developmentally challenged.
Well, this money can allow the agency to do things it couldn't otherwise, such as provide furnishings for group homes or modify vans to make them accessible to many of our clients who are in wheelchairs.
The Navy League of Canada was at City Council last night to make a presentation to the city. Mayor Hurst accepted an award in recognition of the city's contribution to Navy League objectives. Objectives like citizenship development and an ongoing interest in the water that surrounds it. Malcolm Campbell, CBC News, Windsor.
We had a very cool day today, a high of 11 degrees, way below normal for this time of year. A mix of sun and cloud in the forecast. I'll have the whole thing for you later on the Windsor Evening News. When we come back, our gripe guy takes on furnace frustrations. Jim Tracy's Gripe Line when we return. This is the time of year when you find out if your furnace is working, and some people realize too late their gas has been cut off because of a venting problem with their furnace. And while the timing is bad, the fix-it bill doesn't have to be. As Jim Tracy reports in this week's Gripe Line, fixing the problem shouldn't break the bank.
Ooh, chilly. It's that time of the year. Get the jackets out, find the gloves, and turn on the furnace.
For me, it's a simple flick of the switch, but for some, it'll cost thousands of dollars before any heat comes out of their vents. They're cold and they're griping.
I have 2 young kids, and I can't have my furnace off forever.
Marianne Goulet's furnace has been cut off by Union Gas. They're following safety orders from the Ontario government. And she's not the only one.
In Essex County, we have about 100 appliances that are in that situation. They're shut off at this time.
Here's the problem. Over time, the venting coming off this mid-efficiency furnace tends to crack and fall apart, and it could leak carbon monoxide. The Ontario government has known about this for a few years, and most people have been notified. But Marianne Goulet found out by registered letter in August. And she's got to get it fixed before they turn the gas back on. Today, she's getting a contractor's estimate.
In this case, you're probably talking about $1,400 to put the stainless steel in.
Well, that didn't come as a big surprise to Marianne. Her estimates have come in from $1,200 to replace venting to $3,300 for replacing a 3-year-old furnace. A furnace there's nothing wrong with.
I started to feel that we were taken advantage of a little bit, and that certain companies were capitalizing on this situation.
But even suppliers say this stuff's expensive. One 90-degree elbow, $155. It was made solely to fix mid-efficiency furnace venting problems.
It costs an arm and a leg, and we're working on very little margins. We're trying to help what we can.
So you guys aren't ripping anybody off then?
Hell no.
Figure in taxes, you're talking $476.25 to put the D-vent up.
You are kidding me.
No.
Marianne felt a little less ripped off after hearing this quote. Instead of using stainless steel to vent out the side of the house, they'll use a less expensive vent pipe and go through the roof.
That's unreal. I've never had when any company come out and even suggest or make an effort to see if we could have this job done.
It makes you wonder why the whole thing was done in the first place. This stuff's had to pass a lot of inspections.
Some of it's material related, some of it's installer related. You know, and who's going to sort that out and how many years it's going to take? I don't know.
But for Marianne and 8,000 other Ontarians who've coughed up big bucks to get this venting problem fixed, there may be some recourse. A class action suit has been filed against 3 venting manufacturers.
To have something like this come up is it's very serious for us.
Union Gas officials say it can be serious, and there are people out there who don't even know they have a problem.
It's confusing for us, and I'm sure to the public it's very confusing.
Confused? You can call this number, or pick up a list of important numbers at Union Gas or the Channel 9 reception desk.
Mini Gripe! Hey Jim, here I am at the bank again. Today, it's out of service. Any other day, there'd be a lineup, 3-4 deep, trying to pay their bills. The banks have taught us how to use the machine, pushed us to use the machine. Half the time the machines aren't working, and when they are working, there's not enough machines to service the people that have been forced to use them.
Hey John, the good news is that CIBC banks alone plan to add 10 more machines in the city within a year. Hopefully they work. And soon you'll be able to get traveler's checks and buy American bucks at most ATMs. Bank officials say you won't need to go to the bank much though. You'll do the transactions on the internet at home. For the Gripe Line, I'm Jim Tracy.
If you have a consumer gripe, call Jim at 255-3419. Leave a message on the machine, including your phone number. Tony Doucette's sports report is just around the corner and still ahead on the Windsor Evening News, dismantling a piece of Walkerville history. We'll take a step back in time to an era of steam engines and lumber mills. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Joe, taking a break from Paragon Papery. Today's temperature is 15 degrees. It's a little overcast. We could use some sunshine, Carol. What do you think?
You got it. Actually, yesterday we were saying we were going to have clouds and showers for most of the week. Today, things have changed for the better, I might add. Currently, the temperature is 11 degrees with moderate north winds running at about 24 kilometers per hour. We'll see cloudy skies, patchy fog forming overnight, a few showers developing toward dawn, but a low overnight of 7 degrees. Scattered showers tomorrow morning and cloudy until the afternoon. Then we'll see a few sunny breaks tomorrow afternoon. The high tomorrow near 12 degrees. 14 with a mix of sun and cloud on Thursday, mainly sunny and 14 on Friday, variable cloudiness and 18 degrees on Saturday. That's your weather forecast for the week. Here's the big picture tonight from Lauren Sedlak, and Lauren is a grade 6 student at École St. Paul from Stony Point. Looks like one of Canada's finest there, I think, but I think it might be just a depiction of a friend.
Well, what I do know is
that
that is an unfortunately placed cloud. Directly overnight.
Well,
Nice
it's going to feel that way tonight and tomorrow morning.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
On to sports. Want to watch some playoff baseball tonight? Well, look at it this way. Just like you, your favorite beverage has another day to chill. It's been raining all day in New York, and it will continue through tonight, so Game 1 of the American League Championship Series has been postponed. And because of that, the Yankees and the Orioles have another day to get wrapped up in the excitement of the American League Championship Series.
Having gone through it once before, many moons ago, I still can remember, the great feeling it is to compete in this kind of environment. And I'm really enjoying the process right now. I mean, it's been a long time.
It is different, and it is exciting, yes. But does it change really the way that you go about your work and the way that you go about pitching to hitters? Not really.
I think that this was meant to be. There's always been a great rivalry between the Yankees and the Orioles. I know when I was a player, the Yankees were the team that when I came up that we had to beat if we wanted to win the American League.
Game 1 has been rescheduled for tomorrow afternoon. They'll get it going shortly after 4 o'clock. Game 2 has been pushed back to Thursday. Game 1 of the National League Championship Series is scheduled for tomorrow night in Atlanta, the Braves and the St. Louis Cardinals. 4 Windsorites are headed for Chicago this week for the World Bare Knuckle Karate Championships, which implies that the fighters compete with their bare hands. And they do, but only to a point. Aside from a trip to the travel agent and asking for a day or two off work, this is how Thomas Kuhashevsky prepares for a trip to Chicago. That's where he'll muster the moxie and skill it takes to compete at the world championship level in bare-knuckle karate, a sport where more is permitted than is not.
Elbows, knees, throws, sweeps, kicking to the legs, kicking to the head is allowed. With bare-knuckle rules, however, you cannot punch the face to keep some sport involved in the whole event.
It's here we admit there's something wrong with this picture. If it's bare-knuckle karate, what's with the boxing gloves? Well, you see, a bare-knuckle karate match starts with 3 2-minute rounds. If both men are still standing, they put on boxing gloves and blows to the head become legal. Enter Bill Grant, a boxing coach recruited to help some black belt martial artists.
It's interesting, and because I have had very little involvement in the kicking aspect of any kind of combat. But from a boxer's perspective, after these gentlemen get to the 3rd round, more particularly, they have to use their boxing skills.
That's a sanitized way of saying, knock the other guy out. Tomas Kuhashevsky's left his share of opponents on the wrong end of an ammonia stick. He's won the World Heavyweight Championship the last 4 years in a row.
I think I'm a pretty versatile fighter. I had already lots of experience, even before '92. That's the first time I won it. And, well, I had a little bit of luck too.
Paul Rousseau, a lightweight, goes to the World Championships hoping some of that luck rubs off.
I'm hoping to win this year. I've been there 3 times now, and I've come close a few times. I was runner-up 1 year. And hoping I'll come through this year.
Reno Belcastro and Dominic Rossi are the other Windsorites headed for Chicago. This isn't called a tough man competition, but they don't make them any tougher than these guys. They didn't play much defense in Montreal last night. 12 goals in the game between the Habs and the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. One coming up here by Mark Recchi in the 3rd period is my pick as the prettiest of the lot. Great setup by Mark Musinski. This game ended in a 6-6 tie. Mike Gardner needed one more goal to complete the hat trick last night in Boston. Keith Tkachuk made sure he got it, feeding Gardner in front of an empty net. Look at that. Phoenix beat Boston 5-2. And Rod Brindamore scored one goal and set up another as Philadelphia beat New Jersey 3-1. The Devils led it 1-0 in the third period. 5 games in the NHL tonight, including Edmonton at Toronto. Still with hockey, the NHL announced a couple of suspensions today. One of them to Rangers captain Mark Messier, 2 games with pay, or 2 games without pay, that is, and a $1,000 fine for hitting Mike Huff from behind on Saturday night. Edmonton's Louis DeBrusk will miss at least 1 game for slashing Vancouver's Dana Merzen. For now, it's a 1-game suspension, but it could be lengthened. And the high school basketball and volleyball schedules are busy today. We'll have a complete scoreboard for you tonight at 11 on the Windsor Late News. And a reminder that you can call those scores in on the CBC Sports Hotline. There's the number, 255-3449. And that's it for this afternoon.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
See you tonight at 11, and I'll see you after this break.
You are watching Windsor's most popular newscast, the Windsor Evening News. Later tonight on CBC Television.
A piece of Walkerville history is being demolished so they can put up a parking lot. However, the contents of the building may live to see another day. Cindy McCrae explains.
There's not much going on outside this old building on Walker Road. But inside, members of the Essex County Steam and Gas Engine Club are hard at work.
This is the Walkerville Planing and Lumber Mill, which was started by Hiram Walkers, and supplied wood for all of Essex County, including Windsor and Detroit.
100 years ago, this building was full of activity, but the engine has been idle for a long time. The current owner, Sonica Lumber Products, plans to turn the property into a parking lot, at least for now. The building is right next door to the train station, so you could say one kind of engine is making way for another.
We didn't want to destroy this engine and sell it for scrap if we could find someone that could remove it and restore it, and he's waiting to see the day that it runs again.
So, piece by piece, they are moving this huge steam engine. They'll dismantle the small parts and leave the rest until the building comes down next week. This wheel alone weighs 10 tons and is 13 feet wide. The steam-powered radiator was one of many used to heat the building.
The club is looking for a permanent home to set up this engine along with 2 others. Then they eventually hope to get this engine up and running again to show people how a steam-powered lumber mill actually worked. Cindy McCrae, CBC News, Windsor.
Thanks, Cindy. The face of community health care is changing, and tonight we're going to show you what the local health council has in mind for you. Also, we'll have the story of a Windsor man. He'll be sharing his story of relief work in Puerto Rico during the hurricane. We'll show you the work of Louis Marion tonight on the Windsor Late News, all starting at 11. Now, if you'd like to reach us, it's as simple as picking up the phone and calling 255-3504. Leave a message on our voicemail. Or on the internet, you can write to us. Our email address is hometeam@windsor.cbc.ca. The CBC Evening News from Toronto is up next with more on the resignation of General Jean Boyle, so stay with us for that. In the meantime, for everyone here on the Windsor Evening News, I'm Carol McNeil. Thank you for joining me tonight. Hope to see you tonight for the update at 11.
Still asking, will that be smoking or non? Barnett jury, no recommendations. And General Jean Boyle marching out.
The CBC Evening News with Suhana Marchand.
Good evening. If you've got 'em, you can smoke 'em. City politicians have decided an all-out ban on smoking in restaurants wasn't such a good idea after all, so they've come up with a compromise, the 25% solution. Adam Vaughan has been following the debate. He joins us live. Adam.
Thanks, Anna. I'm standing in what is for now a smoking section. That may not be for very much longer. Council has come up with a compromise. It's their third attempt at a compromise this year, and they think this one is going to fly. At least they hope so.
Sometimes I wonder in this council what people are smoking.
It was a volatile meeting, at times funny, at other times angry. Councillors who voted for the 100% ban in July took turns explaining why they supported a compromise this time around.
We voted for the 100% ban and voted against the bylaw because we wanted to see whether or not you people had the guts to vote for it and stick by it. You don't. You don't. And don't try to deny it. The fact we're dealing with it today proves it.
We have a choice today, I think, to settle this issue and to pass a bylaw that is sustainable.
By the time they voted, the 17 councillors had come up with 17 contradictory and confusing attempts at a compromise. The only one to pass was Peter Tappan's motion to let bars and restaurants build separately ventilated areas for smokers.
It gets us 90-95% of the spaces in the city are going to be smoke-free, but there's going to be choice in a number of establishments for owners and for smokers. I just think that the public's going to be a lot more comfortable with this.
The restaurant industry was quick to denounce the new compromise.
In a restaurant this size, we only have 35 seats on our main floor. It's somewhat of outrage because it's physically and structurally impossible to contain a 25% area. It would be the size of a closet.
Now, Anna, we've heard from the restaurant industry. Let's talk to some customers. You know about the compromise today. What do you think of it?
Well, I really appreciate the transitionary aspect of it, giving us time to at least conform, if you will.
Okay, well, you're a smoker. You're not a smoker. What do you think of it?
Well, I still feel that it's a very fair compromise. It gives equal rights to everybody that's involved, and everybody can come out and enjoy themselves and have a good time.
Well, there you have it, Suhana. What it looks like is that smokers and non-smokers think the compromise will fly, so maybe council's got it right this time.
When does the bylaw come into effect, Adam?
It comes into effect this March, but, and this is a big but, they can reopen in December, and there is word around council that they want to try and eliminate the smoking sections in restaurants that have 35 or fewer seats. The mayor tried that today, it failed, but they're going to try again in December, probably.
Thank you, Adam. A real surprise today from the jury at the inquest into the death of Tommy Barnett. He was shot by police earlier this year. Now, usually such juries will spend hours poring over testimony and come up with a list of recommendations. But not this time. This jury found no fault with the Metro police officer who pulled the fatal trigger. Here's Lauren Madelon.
Sergeant Ben Troyina says he's gratified jurors believed him, believed that Troyina could not have avoided shooting Thomas Barnett.
I'm sorry the whole incident occurred, but again, I maintain I had no other way out. I had no other choice. I did the only thing I could do, and that's that. What else can I say?
Now that the inquest is officially over, we can show you the weapon that was at the center of attention. This is a 3-foot sword that Thomas Barnett used that night, back January the 10th of this year. It is 2 feet on the blade, about another foot on the handle, and the court has heard that he was waving it much in this manner, and that he refused to capitulate when Troyina asked him to surrender.
If a person is going to attack a police officer with a sword, a 3-foot sword, and if the person is given the opportunity to drop it and doesn't drop it and still attacks the officer, how can any reasonable person say that the officer can do anything but shoot the person?
Barnett's mother left the inquest today, claiming the process is racist. Now, she left before the jury made its conclusions. Had she stayed, she'd have heard Troyina say he feels sorry for her, but that his life, too, has been changed irreparably.
The evidence was taken to be truthful, and nobody had any doubts about what happened that evening, and we feel vindicated, yes.
Lauren Madelon, CBC News, Toronto.
The Harris government made it clear today it doesn't want Labour protesters to shut down Toronto. The day of protest is slated to go 2 Fridays from now. It's a demonstration against the government's budget cuts, and it looks like provincial employees who participate will have to pay. Robin Smythe joins us live from the Ledge. Robin.
Well, so Hannah, if protest organizers and Labour activists are right, getting around Toronto on October 25th will be murder. They're talking about looking at every way that you manage to get around. That they're planning on closing the TTC, they're planning on closing down highways, and they're even talking about closing down Pearson International Airport. They're still recruiting, but with more than 200,000 protesters expected, organizers say their goal to close down Toronto for a day is reachable.
This is a real life and death struggle that we're in, and we need to say no loudly and clearly now, and this is the day to do it.
More and more services are in jeopardy for the October 25th protest. Toronto City Council says its workers can take the day off without penalty. But the Ontario government, that has tolerated 4 past days of action elsewhere, is now starting to speak up.
To permit employees to take the day off without discipline, I think, is wrong. There's almost an implied sort of agreeing with civil disobedience. Yeah. I think that's Barbara Hall doing that. I think that's wrong.
Dave Johnson warns that any provincial employees who don't come to work will be punished.
I'm not surprised. It's the authoritarianism. It's the heavy-handedness.
Gord Wilson says some provincial workers will walk anyway, and virtually every other service will be affected. TTC?
TTC, I don't think there's any doubt, is going down.
Picketers will be at the airport. Ticket agents and flight attendants are being urged not to cross. Airport?
Everything that I have been told in the last week tells me the airport's going down.
Protesters may even block entrances to highways like the 401 and the Don Valley Parkway. But the Labour movement says it will live up to a promise not to interrupt the prestigious Breeders' Cup horse race in Toronto on Saturday.
The Premier will be able to cavort with his blue blood friends.
That doesn't mean Cup organizers and jockeys won't be delayed if they're traveling Friday. So, Hannah, we've talked a lot about inconvenience. When you ask Gord Wilson about the inconveniences he's putting people through on Friday, he has an answer. He says 1 day of inconvenience is nothing compared to what the government is putting people through with its layoffs and its agenda.
Just to switch gears, Robin, an Angus Reid poll out today. Can you update some numbers for us?
That's right. That's exactly right. The government in the past with these protests has been able to defend them by saying we have the support of the public. We have a 52% support from the public. Now a new Angus Reid poll shows they've dropped 8 points in support to 44%. That's the second biggest drop we've seen in this government since they've been in power. The first biggest was after its omnibus bill.
Robin. Still ahead on the CBC Evening News, that looming day of protest.
When people take the time to come out and to protest and to be part of a growing movement, it changes the public consciousness.
We'll ask our what Queen's Park should do, what unionized workers should do about D-Day, Demonstration Day in Metro. Later. A young man set himself on fire in front of horrified bystanders at Riverdale Park today. Our police reporter Sheila Manise has more.
The man called Joseph has burns to his entire body. He set himself on fire with a 5-gallon canister of gasoline. Horrified Parks employees working nearby ran to help.
He told me he was from Ethiopia, that he spoke Canadian. He didn't want help. He wanted to die. He took my hand. He held it tight. He wanted to go.
The burning took place between the Don Valley Parkway and a private school. The smoke could be seen blocks away.
It's terrible. Terrible.
Police officers found the man's clothing in the bushes. There was no wallet. Nothing that could give police his full name.
He was smoldering. He was just removing the last piece of clothing from his left arm and threw it at my feet.
Paramedics applied first aid to the man and took him to hospital. Police comforted the witnesses.
The parks workers did a great job in attempting to assist and comfort the victim, and were greatly traumatized by the event. Hopefully they'll get some assistance from the people in the parks and be able to recover from it, but they deserve a lot of credit.
The chances for the man's survival are slim. No family has been found.
No one knows why Joseph took such an extraordinary step and why he chose to do it in such a public and horrible way. Sheila Manise, CBC News, Toronto.
The TTC has settled the first of its lawsuits over last year's subway crash. Dr. Paul Szabo's wife Kinga was killed in the collision. No details have been released, but the lawyer representing the family says his client has been treated well by the TTC. He also praised the Commission for acting quickly to solve the system's safety problems. It's a dirty, slimy kind of business, but it's worth millions. So when millions of worms start popping up, dead, a lot of people worry. Here's Paul Riley.
These here, pure dead worms. Nothing you can do. You can't go fishing with a dead worm.
And dead worms are what these guys are finding, about 500,000 in the last few days. In this cooler, worms usually last up to 2 years. These days, they're only living a week or two.
Last year was really bad. I thought maybe it'd get better this year. This year was even worse. You see, they're sort of sticking together. Yeah. They're sort of sticking together, and they're supposed to slide. See it, how pale it is?
Aliphagianus is blaming the environment, and though it's a worm problem now, it might spread.
I think they've got a good point because they are vital parts of the food chain. We have birds particularly feed on earthworms.
Van de Bijgaard says it would be premature to try to come up with any conclusions before doing the research. But if there is something in the rain or soil, worms would be the first to know.
They create burrows in the soil, and they pass the soil materials through their bodies and excrete it. And because of that intimate contact with the soil particles, they act as a really good ecotoxicology indicator.
I don't know, somebody have to do something because must be something wrong.
We don't normally undertake investigations of worm activity. However, it's something that our investigators I think would have noticed had there been a major trend.
To the people here, it's really a matter of life or death. If this continues, they don't think their business can survive. 98% of their healthy worms end up going to the States, and the people down there aren't about to be paying good money for this. Paul Riley, CBC News, Toronto.
Lots more to come tonight, including Ken Daniels and the Leafs and the legend. Ken.
Yes, Suhanna, the Leafs play the Oilers tonight at the Gardens. The legend is Bobby Orr, who was in town today. Ironically, on the same day, Alan Eagleson testified for the first time in court. Game 1 of the ALCS rained out in New York. Details coming up in sports. John?
Thanks, Kenny. IMAX, big screen, right? How about IMAX in 3D? Well, it's coming to Toronto, as well as Professor Piano, Boogie Piano, all coming up in entertainment.
Well, a misty, moisty Tuesday is going to be followed by a misty, moisty, showery Wednesday. Weather, the story of Josephine, her legacy, in about 10 minutes.
And Canada's Army General surrenders. Jean Boyle bows to pressure and steps down as Chief of the Defence Staff. Back in a moment. Months of intense public scrutiny and political pressure over the Somalia affair have come bearing down on Canada's Chief of the Defence Staff. Jean Boyle resigned today as head of Canada's military. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien says he's proud of the way Boyle handled the job, but he accepted his resignation anyway. Julie Van Duzen reports.
The death watch on General Jean Boyle's career reached a fever pitch in the past few days. Now in a letter to the Prime Minister, Boyle says he's stepping down. He writes that to continue in office would jeopardize both the minister's ability to carry out his duties and responsibilities and my ability to focus on the important issues facing the Canadian forces. In the House of Commons, the Reform Party still puffed up over the resignation of David Collinette, now taking credit for Boyle's demise, and demanding to know why the Prime Minister backed the defence duo up until last week.
Recently, Mr. Speaker, as last week, the Prime Minister was telling this House that General Boyle and the former Minister of National Defence enjoyed the government's complete confidence.
How can the Prime Minister explain the flip-flop? Does the Prime Minister believe there is a major crisis in the armed forces or not?
The Prime Minister said David Collinette's resignation changed the landscape.
And I said that I hope that someday I will have the opportunity to welcome him back in the cabinet.
General Boyle's term at the top of Canada's military was wobbly from day one. Boyle's appointment was announced by former Defence Minister David Collinette, but much of the news conference was devoted to defending Boyle and his alleged role in altering documents surrounding the Somalia crisis.
He is going to be the Chief of the Defence Staff, and that is that.
When Boyle testified before the Somalia inquiry, doubts about his leadership only intensified. The general blamed his underlings. He said they must lack moral fiber for cooking up a scheme to falsify documents.
If CDSs or senior officers resigned every time their subordinates made an error, there'd never be any leadership.
Last Friday, David Collinet resigned for breaching the government's ethics guidelines by intervening in a constituents' immigration case. Because Collinet and Boyle were so intertwined, it was only a question of when Boyle would leave.
This is not the time to gloat, but this is a victory for reformers that have been calling for these changes and for people that want reforms in the armed forces.
If the government has offered Boyle a new job, no one is saying. The Prime Minister's office says Boyle's replacement will be named in the next few days. Julie Van Dusen, CBC News, Ottawa.
On the Labour front tonight, a show of solidarity at a picket line in Scarborough. Hundreds of members of the United Steelworkers of America decided to bolster the picket line at S.A. Armstrong this morning. Workers there have been on strike for 23 weeks. The company has continued operations, though, using replacement workers. A union spokesperson says today's protest managed to stop replacement workers from entering the plant, effectively shutting it down. The next deadline at GM's escalating strikes is tomorrow. But listening to Buzz Hargrove today, it seems not to matter much. The CAW chief says a total shutdown of the automaker is inevitable. Here's Havard Gould. Havard?
So, Anna, the auto workers knew months ago that they would be in tough when they came up to General Motors, and they tried to deal with them on the issue of outsourcing. So they tried to adjust their plans and their strategy accordingly. It's now clear, without success. They are still meeting, still negotiating, but they are negotiations that are going nowhere and are out of time.
The balance of the General Motors operations in Windsor, London, and Woodstock will go down tomorrow night. There's no way to avoid it. Now, even if Munger was trying to get a settlement, which he isn't, there's no way to avoid it. The clock has become our enemy.
It was, for the CAW, an unusual strike strategy, with escalating walkouts. It is now a strategy the union admits has failed.
It didn't work, but we also were sending a message to our membership and their families and their communities and the country that we're not a bunch of crazies that's out to shut General Motors down. There's no way.
But Hargrove says General Motors operations across Canada will be shut down by midnight tomorrow night, with about 26,000 union members off the job. Now, General Motors doesn't like to talk much about the impact of this strike on its North American operations. Most analysts are saying the impact will really begin to bite next week. And when most analysts also agree, this strike could still be going on. Suhana.
Thanks, Havard.
Thanks.
Canada Post is getting out of the junk mail business immediately. The federal government has ordered a review aimed at changing the way the post office operates. Private courier firms have been demanding the government sell off Purolator Courier or its express delivery services. Public Works Minister Deanne Marlowe says that needs more study, but for now, the post office will not be required to withdraw from direct competition with the private sector. 4 sealers in Newfoundland have pleaded guilty to charges of illegal hunting. A video of the hunters clubbing, shooting, and skinning the seals horrified audiences around the world last spring. A judge fined each of the men $750 on each count. And a Canadian-born economist is sharing this year's Nobel Prize for Economics. William Vickery is now a retired professor from Columbia University in the United States. He was born in Victoria. Vickery and James Mirrlees of Cambridge University won the prize for explaining how information, or lack of it, shapes decisions in business. Ken Daniels joins me now with sports. And Ken, a first today for Alan Eagleson, but certainly not the last.
No, he'll be in court for many days. In the U.S., we don't know if that'll ever happen, but here today was round number 1 today. Much of the day was taken up with procedural matters in the case of Alan Eagleson versus former client Mike Gillis, a former Boston Bruins star. Eagleson arrived at the University Avenue Courthouse to testify in his defense in the case of the former Bruin, Mike Gillis. Gillis, who used Eagleson as his agent, is alleging Eagleson stole $41,500 U.S. from his disability insurance payment. Gillis's career ended in 1984 due to a severely broken leg, and the case continues tomorrow. And ironically, Alan Eagleson testified on the same day that Bobby Orr came to town. Orr no longer on speaking terms with his former NHL agent, and the 48-year-old Orr would say only that we didn't plan on my appearance the same day as Eagles. Beyond that, the Eagleson topic is taboo for now until all Eagles legal matters are settled, and that could take quite a while. As for Bobby Orr, he dropped by the Hockey Hall of Fame today on a promotional stop for MasterCard, giving us a chance to catch up on things.
Wide and Keenan, clear to Bucknado. Bobby Orr behind the net to Sanderson. Orr! Bobby Orr!
Number 4, forever captured in space, in more ways than one. This past June, Canadian astronaut Robert Thirsk was aboard the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia with Bobby Orr memorabilia, including his 1970 Stanley Cup ring and a Bruins sweater.
I first thought of sending the replica Stanley Cup, and I contacted Bob, and he said that might be a little too big because we don't have a lot of room. I said, well, let me think about it. And then I came up with the ring and the sweater to send up, and I did. And as you can see from the photos, Bob had a lot of fun with it.
For most of 12 NHL seasons, Orr had a lot of fun when his knees gave him the opportunity. 7 times voted best defenseman. Orr is now part owner of an agency representing athletes.
You had problems in your career in representation. What do you tell young kids today about how they should be represented and handle their affairs?
First of all, their number one job if they're hockey players is hockey. Go out and work hard, and be honest about your game, the effort you give, and so on, and pay attention. Simple as that. Find out what's going on. Why is your money going here? Why is your money going there?
Even those like top NHL prospect Daniel Tkachuk, who never saw Orr play, can gain from his advice.
Yes. Keep all the doors open and have a very courteous attitude towards people, and conduct yourself in a business-like manner.
And that's how Bobby Orr has always conducted himself off the ice and on. Speaking of which, would Orr dominate today's NHL like he did in the early 70s?
I like to skate, I like to handle the puck, and I would think I would play the same way today. How I would do, the players are bigger. You don't have as much room now because of their size, but who knows? I would love to be playing today. It would be great fun.
He looks great. Looks like he could still play. And too bad Bobby Orr has had to drop his association with the Easter Seals skate at the Gardens. Bobby's saying he's just too busy to be a part of it, but it was a great 16 years, and the Leafs will carry on the tradition, minus the Orr name. And speaking of the Maple Leafs, they're looking for a second straight win, meeting the Edmonton Oilers at the Gardens this evening. A good skating team, Edmonton is, that has won its first 2 games.
You've got 2 real elite players in our Knott and Waite, and Waite had a great World Cup. These guys are going to have to, we're going to have to pay special attention to them. I know they've got a very good power play, and all in all, I think they're a team that's on the rise.
They sure are. The Oilers will not have Louis DeBrusk in the lineup tonight, suspended for a slash on Vancouver's Dana Merzen, still waiting for the length of that suspension. Meantime, when New York plays in Florida tonight, the Rangers will be without Mark Messier, suspended 2 games and fined $1,000 for this Sunday night in New York. When these 2 teams first met, Messier slams Florida's Mike Huff from behind. Messier ejected. Rangers argued Huff saw Messier coming and turned his back. Messier couldn't stop in time, but give the NHL credit, at least for not allowing Messier to play in the rematch tonight. Brian Burke reacted quickly, unlike Major League Baseball, but there is still a feeling that Messier got off lightly because he's in New York, NHL headquarters. Most thought Messier would perhaps get a little bit more than just 2 games. Well, Colorado will be without right winger Claude Lemieux for about a week with a pulled groin muscle. Avalanche raised their Stanley Cup banner at home tonight against San Jose. Chicago Blackhawks signed free agent center Adam Creighton today. And no baseball tonight because all day in New York it looked just like this. Lots of rain, so Game 1 of the ALCS will take place tomorrow afternoon between the Yankees and Orioles at 4 o'clock, with Game 2 Thursday at 3. The NLCS starts tomorrow night in Atlanta. The Raptors have named Damon Stoudemire their first ever captain, and their top pick this year, Marcus Camby, will undergo an MRI tonight on a tender right ankle. Raptors don't believe it's anything serious, but want to be certain. And the NFL trade deadline came and went today without a single deal. Not even Atlanta quarterback Jeff George going to Seattle for Rick Meyer. George is suspended, but turned down a $30 million 6-year deal from the Seahawks, so that trade fell through. Suhanna?
Thank you, Ken. Okay. On to the weather now with Bill Lawrence. And Bill, how moist will this mist turn?
It'll be very misty and moisty. Ken's pictures showed it all. That was New York. They're now reporting winds gusting as high as 100 kilometers an hour, wind-driven rain sweeping all of the Big Apple. It started last night. You'll recall her name was Josephine. She was in the Gulf of Mexico, and she came across on the northwest corner of Florida, around Cedar Keys, about midnight. Still a tropical storm, winds of 105 kilometers an hour, and as she moved inland, of course, she started to weaken, but she dumped some 200 millimeters of rain as she traveled to the north and east, up the eastern seaboard. And now she is leaving the Virginias and moving on towards New York City and up the eastern seaboard. She's traveling along this. Josephine likes to move 65 kilometers an hour. That means New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI will feel her presence tonight. They are expected to get between 45 and 50 millimeters of rain and winds gusting up to 80 kilometers an hour. St. John's gets it the night after. We just get a lot more mist and moist. Tonight, then, it'll be foggy. There'll be periods of drizzle. The overnight low at about 8 degrees. Tomorrow, showers expected. About a 60% probability. The dampness continues. We continue cool at about 11. The normal daytime high should be around 17. We get an early look at the beginning of the weekend, Suhana, and we'll have a look at that and also the rest of the country a little later on.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Still to come on the CBC Evening News, get ready for 3D IMAX. So will going to the movies ever be the same? Find out in a moment.
Tonight on the Windsor Late News, how you can avoid a big furnace bill this fall. Join me at 11 o'clock for the Windsor Late News.
Pope John Paul had his appendix removed today in what doctors describe as a textbook operation. They say the surgery was successful and have firmly ruled out reports that the pontiff was suffering from another tumor. Doctors say he may be released from hospital by early next week. The IRA has claimed responsibility for the bombings at a British military base in Northern Ireland. 2 car bombs exploded, injuring 31 people. 12 of them remain in hospital. It's the first attack on a military base in Northern Ireland in 2 years. A Russian cargo plane crashed into a village while trying to land at the airport in Turin, Italy. The plane plowed through 2 farmhouses, killing at least 4 people, 2 of them villagers. More than 20 on board survived. The plane was transporting automobiles to the Middle East. And a British television network has broadcast a video showing an intimate liaison between Diana and her former lover, James Hewitt. Pictures published in the Sun tabloid show Diana in a bra and bicycle shorts embracing Hewitt. There's no word on who took the video, but according to the tabloid, it confirms Diana's claim that she was under secret surveillance during her marriage to Prince Charles. John Northcott now with tonight's entertainment. This is a tough one, John. Can you beat the Diana story?
I can't beat the Princess of Wales having a pillow fight, but imagine if they put it in 3D on a really big screen. Well, that's what they're doing with IMAX movies, and they're coming to Toronto in that form. Leslie Wasserman has the story.
They say it's big, and it is. At the Max felt more like a Rolling Stones concert than the real thing. Soon you'll be able to experience 3D IMAX. The Toronto-based company is about to expand in its hometown.
We're here today to announce that these headsets and the IMAX technology that drives them will be premiering in Toronto in 1997.
And this is the site, right at the corner of John and Richmond Streets. This building still has to be torn down, but they're keeping the facade. The IMAX Theatre will be part of the Festival Hall, an entertainment and retail complex being built by famous players.
We wanted something that would really differentiate this complex from any other in the world, and this was one way of doing it.
The IMAX image is 10 times bigger than the usual 35mm movie. There are 18 IMAX 3D theaters, but so far, only 5 use the new technology that Toronto is getting.
IMAX 3D puts you in places you haven't been before. You're going to move from basically being a viewer to almost being a protagonist.
Toronto's theater will seat about 440 people. Tickets will cost about 10% more than at regular theaters. A 3D IMAX theater is opening this week in a suburb of Montreal. There are only 8 3D IMAX movies in existence. More are being planned. Some will be educational, and others will be narrative feature films. The whole complex will cost about $40 million to build. It's slated to open here next fall. There'll be 14 regular theaters as well as the one IMAX theater. And of course, you'll need these to see the movie. For CBC Entertainment, I'm Leslie Wasserman in Toronto.
Well, he never appeared with Princess Diana in a pillow fight, although that might be an idea for his next comedy. Leslie Nielsen, Canadian-born, big Hollywood star in comedies, but now he's back on stage in a serious role that opened last night at the Royal Alex.
They killed him because they were made that way, because somewhere in the infinite processes that go to the making up of the boy or the man, something slipped.
Leslie Nielsen as Clarence Darrow, the crusading American lawyer from the 1920s and 30s, who helped save the young killers Leopold and Loeb from the death penalty, and defended the teaching of evolution in schools in what became known as the Scopes monkey trial.
He did everything with great reason and great insight and logic, but he still led you to feeling, because if you started to feel what he felt, then you might understand what his client felt.
In recent years, Nielsen has been making audiences feel like laughing in a succession of comedies like the Naked Gun series. But Nielsen is serious about Darrow. He bought the rights to the play and plans to tour with it off and on for as long as he can. It's the first time he's appeared on stage in 14 years. The one-man show format appeals to him.
I think you're liable to run into more trouble when you're working with people, because for whatever reasons, they can do things that disconcert you or shift your concentration, or anything can happen.
That all of life is worth saving.
Much of what Darrow argued for in court is still relevant today, but the play tries to show the whole man, including humor.
He says, I hate spinach, and I'm glad I do, because if I liked it, I'd probably eat it, and I just hate it. It's just play. It's playing with words. It's playful. There's a joy about it that I like. It's not just a joke for a joke kind of thing. Although I'm sure that a joke for a joke is something that Darrow could have done quite easily.
Clarence Darrow, a one-man play, runs through until October 12th at the Royal Alexandra Theatre. And yes, he is just as much fun and just as funny in person as he is on screen. Joanna?
John, back to 3D. Great expectations for this?
Well, they're hoping to bring in between $10 and $15 million at the box office in the first year, attracting about 2 million people, and it's a boon for the neighborhood. A lot of attractions down there already, but local restaurateurs are saying that, for example, as opposed to paying $50 to $100 for a theater seat, you're going to have that much for live theater, you're going to have that much more money left over after seeing the IMAX to spend in the bars and restaurants.
Okay, go back to your pillow fight.
Okay, thanks.
Still to come on the CBC Evening News. They're regulars now, our Tuesday political panel.
Oh, putting the fox in the hen house kind of thing.
On the choice of Chris Stockwell as new speaker on the upcoming day of protest, our panel has no shortage of opinion. Back in a moment. Time now for our look inside Queen's Park. Our panel is here, or at least 2/3 of our original panel. We will introduce you to our newest member, but first, here's what happened to the old one.
The member from Beaches Woodbine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and may I add my words of congratulations and say that I'll miss you from the CBC panel. It was going to be good, but anyways.
The clock is stopped. You can tell because the numbers stopped moving. I would like to inform the members.
Speaker, I think I've followed the format used by many members of this House and withdraw. I said, if I said anything unparliamentary, I withdraw it.
The member from Hamilton Centre, there isn't if, ands, or buts about it. What you said was unparliamentary. I give you the last warning to withdraw. Withdraw.
Some smiles during that tape. Joining me now, our panelists, Francis Lankin, the member for Beaches Woodbine, Eleanor Kaplan from the Oriole riding, and Tony Clement, our newest member who has replaced, of course, Chris Stockwell, the new speaker
It's
from
not going to be
Brampton
nearly
South.
as much fun, Tony, but
I'll do my best.
you'll do best.
At least we have a conservative insider.
You can't turn him off before he even gets a chance,
So it's going to be fun.
Your reaction, or what did you hear immediately after Chris Stockwell became the new speaker, after 7 ballots? Eleanor.
Well, I think a lot of people were very surprised. Certainly, Chris isn't considered an insider, and the fact that the Conservative caucus supported him. But I think it was the opposition that elected Chris Stockwell. I think the Conservative caucus split. It's kind of like putting the fox in the hen house kind of thing.
Or I heard the line of making Robbie Alomar an umpire. Does that fit?
That would work. You know, it's close. I think I got to see the votes as they were going after each ballot being whipped for our party, and I could see it emerging. Kept shaking my head. Couldn't quite believe that this was going to happen. You know, that the bad boy of the legislature was going to be put in charge of the rest of the kids. But I suppose that's an old way of handling a discipline problem, right? Give them something to do, give them some responsibility, and you bring them into line.
Now the pediatricians say time out chair, so maybe that's what we should call the new speaker's chair.
Well, I think it's the old adage, only Nixon can go to China a little bit here. I think a lot of people on the Conservative side of the caucus were impressed with Chris's ability in the House and said, look, if any guy knows all the tricks of the trade, it's Chris Stockwell, and maybe he can put a sense of order and decorum back into the legislature. So there was quite a lot of people who were not voting for Chris as a vote against anything, but more as, hey, this guy knows his way around this place. He's been here. He knows all the tricks of the trade. He's the fellow that we want to see in charge of it.
That's a nice spin. But, yeah, there is another theory.
Francis?
And in fact, in talking to a number of the Tory backbenchers that were supporting Chris, and you could actually see it if you can get the clip. Watch when the results were announced, that last ballot, and which ones of the Tories jumped to their feet and were cheering, and you can see where the vote was. And you can see that they're, by and large, the Tories that are disenchanted, the backbench that feels that they don't have input, that the cabinet's not listening to them, and they wanted to send a message. Now, they had a little bit of help, as Eleanor said, from the opposition, but it was an interesting maneuver.
I think from our perspective, here's a fellow who knows something about the rules of the legislature.
Because he's broken them all.
Well, that was his pitch.
You know, and
his pitch to the caucuses was,
right. Yeah.
I've tried to break them all. I know the rules better than anybody else. The other thing is, I think he made a very good point, saying he understood the frustrations of being in opposition. He's been around long enough. And I agree. I think he'll be a good speaker.
What is his first task then, Eleanor?
Well, I think his first task is his own credibility in the speaker's chair and controlling his smile, his
expressive face,
his desire. That's right.
Turning the loud mouth into the voice of common sense.
That's right. So I think he's doing that extremely well. I think the next is the administration of the Legislative Assembly. The big problems with decorum and security and all those things that the Speaker has to get a hold of. But
we'll watch for those as they unfold. But with 3 weeks to go, the City of Toronto is already bracing itself for what may, or some say may not be, a major disruption. So far, Labour shutdowns have already hit London, Hamilton, Peterborough, and Kitchener-Waterloo. And the Labour movement says the days of action planned for Toronto will be the biggest protest against the Harris government yet. They're calling for workers across Metro to take the day off on October 25th, and they're hoping more than 200,000 people will turn out for a massive rally on the 26th. Now, yesterday, Toronto City Council lent its support. It told city workers they could take a day off if they wanted to join the protest. The city and the unions say it's time to make a stand against Tory government cuts. Tony, how is your government preparing for what could be a huge day of protest?
Well, obviously it's occurring at the same time as our party convention, so we'll be deliberating inside while demonstrations, a perfectly democratic tool in our society, occurs on the outside as well. And I guess we're seeing that as one form of protest against the agenda that we were elected to do. And it's a legitimate form of protest, but we feel we were elected by the majority of people.
Okay, before you get into that, is there a benchmark in terms of how much of an impact this protest will have. If there are 10,000 people or if there are 100,000 people, then all of a sudden it becomes significant.
Well, what I hear from my constituents and what others are going to hear from their constituents, that will be, I'm sure, part of putting it into the hopper as to how important this event is going to be. What I heard from the other days of protest from my constituents was, don't listen to the protesters. They don't represent the majority. Keep on doing what you're doing because you're doing what you said you'd do. And if that continues, then I think we're on the right track. If there's a change in tone from my constituents, and clearly maybe we've got to look at that and say, are we still on the right track or are we veering off track?
Well, you're going to be on our panel for a while, so that question we can put to you later. Francis, reaction to the upcoming days of protest?
Well, I think it's going to be a very large and important protest. And, you know, it may not impact the government today or the days that it happens. And let me just use Hamilton as a benchmark. There were 125,000 people in the streets, and Premier Harris was inside the hotel looking out over the crowd. Now, when he went to Montreal on the Unity protest, there were 100,000 people there, and he said, this is a magnificent display of Canadians' opinion. In Hamilton, he looked out and said, it's a bunch of special interest groups. However, when people take the time to come out and to protest and to be part of a growing movement, it changes the public consciousness, and that's an important political event. Whether or not the Premier listens today or not, he will have to listen sometime.
Eleanor, do you think today's Angus Reid Southern News poll will have any impact on how the government reacts to these days of protest?
Well, every politician that you talk to will tell you that the only poll that's important is the one on Election Day.
But today's poll, if I can just go over this poll, support dropped for the Conservatives by 8%, down to 44%. That's in 1 month, 8% drop.
Governments watch those polls very carefully. They watch it because it's a reflection of how the public's feeling about them. And I think the public is starting to get very nervous about this government as a result of today's poll. I think it's the single biggest drop that we've seen. The impact on opposition parties is not as significant as it is on the governing party. And I think protests and the consciousness raising that will come from those kinds of events will be something that the government will watch very, very carefully.
Well, thank you all. I look forward to next week. We are always interested in your thoughts on our newscast, so give us a call. Our phone number is 205-7700. Here's our fax number, 205-7166. And our internet address is tvnews@toronto.cbc.ca. And coming up tomorrow on the CBC Evening News, healing horses through touch.
The texture and feel of his skin and the resilience of his flesh underneath is very different. He feels much more alive.
I think he probably would have just died in the field because it was just too hard for him to get around.
This will help to restore the electrical impulses in atrophied muscle.
Is it fair to the animals or is it not?
Is it?
I don't know.
He has tension in the muscle fibers here.
Can herbs and massage really cure sick animals? Watch for that story tomorrow. Some business to take care of before we continue. That videotape that shows the Princess Diana frolicking with her riding instructor, James Hewitt, that John and I were frolicking with earlier, apparently is bogus. The Sun newspaper in London, which published pictures from the videotape, says it was the victim of one of the most elaborate hoaxes of the decade. It has apologized to the princess and to James Hewitt. We do the same to you. We'll go on to Bill Lawrence now. And apologies for the weather, Bill. Let's just keep this going.
Oh, no. In weather, there is truth. You can see the great shroud of fog is starting to descend on the city tonight. We showed you that earlier. We've lost about the top third of the CN Tower. And before we all disappear up here in that gray mist, let's look around the country. Away we go to the Yukon. Nice day there today. Cloudy skies, temperatures with a few sunny breaks, running from about 4 degrees in the north at Dawson to 8 in the south. It was a cloudy and snowy sort of day. Flurries in the air across much of the territory. The temperature there this afternoon at 0. Nice sunny day across Baffin Island, Iqaluit down in the south tonight, reporting a temperature of -4 degrees. Out on the coast, it was partly cloudy. Vancouver and Victoria not far from the 18-degree mark. Look at this, the prairies are starting to mild up. It was sunny there. Edmonton and Calgary getting into the mid to high teens. Saskatoon, a similar story, just shy of the 20-degree mark at Regina, 19 mid-afternoon. And Winnipeg was partly cloudy and 15. Churchill, cloudy and -2 up in northern Manitoba. Montreal was overcast and 13. Quebec City about 11 degrees this afternoon. Periods of light drizzle at Goose Bay. And the temperature there at 3 o'clock was 2 degrees. In the Maritimes today, you'd never know it was coming, but they are expecting the remains of the hurricane. What was left of the tropical storm is bearing down on them, and Josephine is going to dump about 40 millimeters of rain and give them winds up over 80 kilometers an hour, but today was a pretty fine day. St. John's was clouded over, and they will get the rain tomorrow night from Josephine. A look now at our systems map. Center of high didn't do us much good here in southern Ontario, but it brought some sunny intervals to northern reaches of this province. And it also pushed that cold front just to the south of us, and along that we got the periods of drizzle. Moving up the eastern seaboard, there's what is left of Josephine, and that'll give us some showers tomorrow as it heads towards Atlantic Canada. In behind that, a high that's tottering on the crest of the Rockies, and that will bring us some sunshine for Thursday and for Friday. Now, as we look around the province today, it was cloudy in the north, and it was well below the norm for this time of year, except for far north, and it was sunny. Here in the south, overcast conditions and temperatures around the 10-degree mark. Same situation for tonight, cloudy, fog, and drizzle. The temperature 8 degrees. Tomorrow, showers throughout the day and still cool at 11. As I mentioned earlier, partial clearing for Thursday. By the time we get to Friday, the sun should be out. And then Saturday, it looks like it'll start off cloudy, but it will be milder for the beginning of the Thanksgiving holiday at about 16 degrees. Suhanna, that's a Tuesday night. Look at the weather.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
That is the CBC Evening News. Join us at 11 for an update on all of your local stories. I'm Suhanna. For all of us here, thank you for watching. Good night.
Introducing the all-new 97 Jeep TJ with dual airbags, a smoother ride, and superior handling.
Oh! Nature! Trees! Boulders! I'm free!
Must be his first Jeep.
Rookie.
Oh! God!
Now at your local Jeep dealer.
Serving Essex, Kent, and Lambton counties, this is CBC Television.